Hello, I am Hayes Fierro, editor of Information Warfare magazine. Today we revisit one of the most pivotal transitions in modern geopolitics, how the United States, after emerging victorious in Cold War I, inadvertently set the stage for Cold War II. Through strategic missteps, unfulfilled assurances, and a lack of balance in its policies, the US ignited a renewed rivalry with global implications. In this analysis, we dive into the not 1 inch eastward assurance, NATO's expansion, and the calculated moves that defined the post-Cold War era and Cold War II. This journey will unravel how actions intended to secure peace instead fanned the flames of division, positioning the US on the brink of losing its dominance on the global stage after winning this position during the Cold War. Let's begin this thought-provoking journey into history, strategy, and the lessons we must learn to navigate a fragile global order. From victory to vulnerability, how the United States won Cold War I and inadvertently ignited Cold War II. Introduction: the United States emerged triumphant from Cold War I, with the Soviet Union collapsing under economic strain and internal dissent. This marked the end of a decades-long ideological and geopolitical struggle, seemingly ushering in an era of unipolar dominance for the US. However, rather than consolidating this victory through diplomacy and stability, a series of strategic missteps and broken promises reignited tensions. Today, Cold War II is not only a reality, but one the US risks losing. The not 1 inch eastward. Promise and its aftermath. The assurance to Gorbachev, 1990. As the Cold War was winding down, US Secretary of State James Baker, alongside other Western officials, reportedly assured Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev that NATO would not expand 1 inch eastward beyond Germany. These assurances were critical to securing Soviet agreement to German reunification and the withdrawal of Soviet forces from Eastern Europe. However, no formal treaty codified this promise, and this promise was broken by US and NATO. While Gorbachev later acknowledged its informal nature, the perception of betrayal became entrenched in Russian political discourse. NATO's expansion, a broken promise or breach of understanding. 1990s. Expansion. In the post-Cold War era, NATO began incorporating former Eastern Bloc countries like Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic. For these nations, NATO membership was a guarantee of security against potential Russian aggression. 2004 and the Baltic states, the inclusion of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, former Soviet republics, was a particularly provocative move from Moscow's perspective. Ukraine and Georgia, 2008. NATO's Bucharest summit declaration that these nations would eventually join the alliance was seen as crossing a red line for Russia, further intensifying animosity. By expanding NATO eastward, the West arguably overplayed its hand, prioritizing immediate gains over long-term stability. The strategic missteps of a unipolar moment. The Wolfowitz Doctrine. The 1992 Defense Planning Guidance, often referred to as the Wolfowitz Doctrine, articulated a strategy for the US to maintain global dominance by preventing the rise of any rival power. This approach reflected a triumphalist mindset that overlooked the need for balance in global affairs. Middle East distractions. The US expended significant resources on interventions in the Middle East, including the 2003 Iraq invasion, based on false claims of weapons of mass destruction, regime change efforts in Libya and Syria, destabilizing the region and fostering anti-American sentiment. These actions diverted attention and resources away from addressing Russia's resurgence and rising tensions in Eastern Europe. Russia's resentment and resurgence, perception of encirclement. From Moscow's perspective, NATO's expansion, US missile defense systems in Europe, and Western support for color revolutions in post-Soviet states constituted an existential threat. Economic and energy dimensions. Ukraine, a key transit country for Russian natural gas to Europe, became a focal point of economic and geopolitical contention. EU-backed efforts to reduce dependence on Russian energy added to Moscow's sense of encirclement. Crimea and eastern Ukraine, 2014. Russia's annexation of Crimea and its involvement in eastern Ukraine reflected a calculated response to what it perceived as Western overreach. These moves underscored Moscow's willingness to assert itself militarily with proxy wars against the US and NATO to defend its interests. How the US ignited Cold War II, broken promises and strategic overreach. By failing to honor the spirit of its 1990 assurances, the US undermined trust with Russia. NATO's expansion and the framing of Russia as an eternal adversary reanimated the very dynamics the end of Cold War I was meant to resolve. Underestimating Russia, the West's focus on the Middle East and its dismissive approach to Russia allowed Moscow and Putin to rebuild its cyber, military, and economic clout, laying the groundwork for a new era of geopolitical conflict. This resurgence was not limited to traditional power structures. Russia also ignited a sophisticated information war that weaponized digital technology, propaganda, and cyber attacks to challenge the West on a global scale. Russia's information war extended into super PACs, provided anonymously thanks to Citizens United, and was evident when Republican anti-Trumpers magically became MAGA. Through state-sponsored entities like the Internet Research Agency and platforms such as RT and Sputnik, Russia deployed disinformation campaigns aimed at undermining democratic institutions, influencing elections, and sowing discord within Western societies. Simultaneously, Russia's cyber capabilities expanded significantly, with state-backed hackers executing operations that targeted critical infrastructure, government networks, and private industries in the US and Europe. These actions not only showcased Moscow's growing technological prowess, but also exposed vulnerabilities in Western cyber defenses. Militarily, Russia modernized its forces, focusing on hybrid warfare strategies that combined conventional military strength with asymmetric tactics, including the use of private military companies like the Wagner Group. Economically, Putin leveraged energy resources as a geopolitical weapon, using Europe's dependence on Russian natural gas to exert influence while forging closer ties with China to counteract Western sanctions. This multifaceted strategy caught the US unprepared, as years of focusing on Middle Eastern conflicts diverted attention and resources away from addressing Russia's resurgence. By the time the West recognized the extent of Russia's reassertion on the global stage, Moscow had already re-established itself as a formidable challenger, capable of undermining the US-led world order through both traditional and unconventional means. The US is on the verge of losing Cold War II, eroding alliances. NATO's internal divisions over defense spending and strategic priorities have long been a source of weakness, but Trump's amplification of these issues further undermined the alliance's effectiveness. By publicly criticizing NATO members for failing to meet defense spending commitments, Trump not only weakened solidarity within the alliance, but also provided fodder for adversaries like Russia to exploit these fractures. Moreover, Trump's inconsistent foreign policy, marked by unpredictable decisions and rhetoric, raised questions about the US's commitment to global leadership. This erosion of trust among allies weakened long-standing alliances and commitments, creating openings for Russia to exploit. Whether intentional or accidental, Trump's approach to foreign policy and NATO during his administration coincided with a critical moment in history, leaving the West vulnerable to Russia's aggressive strategies in the realms of information warfare and ideological influence. By framing NATO as ineffective and questioning its relevance, Trump inadvertently aligned with one of Russia's key strategic goals, undermining Western unity. This timing, coupled with a lack of coherent strategy to counter Russia's resurgence, has left the West exposed in a war of information and ideals. As NATO's cohesion faltered, Russia capitalized on the opportunity to expand its influence, not just militarily, but also through the spread of disinformation and the destabilization of democratic institutions across the globe. Economic and military constraints. The US's national debt and military overstretch limit its ability to project power effectively. Russia and China's growing partnership presents a formidable challenge to US hegemony. Geopolitical stalemates. In Ukraine, the US faces a protracted conflict with no clear resolution, draining resources and political capital. Russia's influence in the Middle East and Africa continues to expand, undermining US interests. Lessons from Cold War I, a path forward, rebuilding trust and diplomacy. The US must acknowledge its role in creating the conditions for Cold War II and seek to rebuild trust with adversaries and allies alike. This includes revisiting arms control agreements and fostering open dialogue with Russia. Strategic realignment. Prioritize balancing power rather than pursuing dominance. The West's focus on the Middle East and its dismissive approach to Russia allowed Moscow and Putin to rebuild its cyber, military, and economic clout, laying the groundwork for a new era of geopolitical conflict. This resurgence was not limited to traditional power structures. Russia also ignited a sophisticated information war that weaponized digital technology, propaganda, and cyber attacks to challenge the West on a global scale. Through state-sponsored entities like the Internet Research Agency and platforms such as RT and Sputnik, Russia deployed disinformation campaigns aimed at undermining democratic institutions, influencing elections, and sowing discord within Western societies. Simultaneously, Russia's cyber capabilities expanded significantly, with state-backed hackers executing operations that targeted critical infrastructure, government networks, and private industries in the US and Europe. These actions not only showcased Moscow's growing technological prowess, but also exposed vulnerabilities in Western cyber defenses. Militarily, Russia modernized its forces, focusing on hybrid warfare strategies that combined conventional military strength with asymmetric tactics, including the use of private military companies like the Wagner Group. Economically, Putin leveraged energy resources as a geopolitical weapon, using Europe's dependence on Russian natural gas to exert influence while forging closer ties with China to counteract Western sanctions. This multifaceted strategy caught the US unprepared, as years of focusing on Middle Eastern conflicts diverted attention and resources away from addressing Russia's resurgence. By the time the West recognized the extent of Russia's reassertion on the global stage, Moscow had already established itself as a formidable challenger, capable of undermining the US-led world order through both traditional and unconventional means. Conclusion. Cold War II was not inevitable. It was the result of strategic missteps, broken promises, and triumphalist policies that failed to prioritize stability. If the US continues on its current path, it risks losing the very global influence it sought to protect. By learning from its mistakes and embracing a more balanced approach, the US has an opportunity to avert further escalation and chart a path toward sustainable peace. In all actuality, even if Trump were considered a Manchurian candidate, his rhetoric largely reflects what Russia has been saying all along. You broke all your agreements. This sentiment underscores Russia's long-standing grievances, emphasizing the West's failure to honor perceived commitments, such as NATO's pledge not to expand eastward. These grievances are not without merit, and acknowledging them does not mean conceding to Russian aggression, but rather understanding the roots of their discontent. Trump's critiques, whether as an American patriot or through the lens of Russian grievances, strike at the heart of these historical debates. As an advocate for resolving these issues, Trump has the opportunity to leverage his position to address legitimate Russian concerns and rebuild trust with allies. However, if his actions erode US alliances, undermine democracy, or dismantle what America has built, he risks destabilizing the very foundations of global order that have ensured peace and security. We do not need to disagree with Russia's grievances to come to terms with them. A balanced approach, where the US acknowledges past missteps without compromising its democratic principles or alliances, is the path forward. As an American patriot, Trump could seek to resolve these tensions through diplomacy and strategy. But as a figure seen as a Russian advocate, his efforts risk fracturing the global system, creating vulnerabilities that could lead to lasting damage. The United States can navigate these challenges without destroying the democracy and alliances that define its strength. It is not about choosing sides, but about fostering a future where grievances are addressed through dialogue and where stability and peace remain the ultimate goals. For more articles like this, visit informationwarfare.com. Thank you.